Welcome back, everybody, to the Marketing Rules podcast. And it's my pleasure to welcome on board today Joe Major. Joe, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who listen who do know who you are, right? I've known who you are for ages. We only actually kind of met properly for a couple of months ago, but I've been kind of following you for a few years. For those people out there who haven't kind of come across you and your work and what you do and how you help businesses, maybe you could kind of give us a little bit about your background and what you do now.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. First of all,
You're welcome.
for those that haven't come across me or heard me banging on about ED&I, my background is recruitment. I've been in the recruitment space, the industry, for coming up to 23 years. I was a recruiter for 17 and a half years, moved into a learning and development role. At the same time, managed to pick up responsibility for diversity and inclusion within the recruitment business that I worked for. Went through a similar journey of discovering where I should be during COVID, and decided that there was a real gap in the industry, a real need to support recruiters, agency side, with diversity, inclusion, equity, equality, and all of that really important stuff. There was an opportunity to deliver it in a way that made sense to a recruiter on desk, attracting talent, supporting clients, and delivering it in a way that made sense to recruiters. Pulling on my experience of running a desk and being a billing manager and having all those responsibilities. So I now spend my time working with recruitment businesses, but also some internal teams as well, and hiring managers, helping them to get to grips with inclusive, accessible, and equitable recruitment, and just giving them the confidence to talk about this really, really important work and to start to understand where their responsibility lays and how they can actually be empowered to be part of the change and break down some of the barriers that candidates face when it comes to their job search, their careers, progression, salary, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I always kind of, we've had a few people on the podcast talking around kind of ED&I, and it always kind of comes across as a bit of a minefield, right? I think that's possibly what initially recruiters think kind of ED&I is, that it's kind of, there's a lot of work. They probably don't understand it particularly well. They probably don't understand the differences between what, diversity, equity, inclusion.
Mm,
It all kind of gets wrapped up, and whether these are all slightly separate things. So maybe a great place to start would be sort of like, from your experience, what is it you think recruiters, what do they think of ED&I is and what it actually is?
mm. I think recruiters often see ED&I as being something that is, you have to almost be an expert and know everything about every single marginalized group to be able to talk about it, with confidence, or even give themselves permission to discuss. I think a lot of the time it's something that we don't think applies to us. And if we do talk about ED&I within our organisation, sometimes, not all the time, it seemed almost as like a corporate social responsibility, do I dare say, like something that you can opt into and get involved, maybe if you're marginalised yourself or you faced a barrier into work. And a lot of the time I'm trying to make recruiters to understand that really when we talk about ED&I in recruitment, what we're talking about is making sure that we're looking at our recruitment processes. We're dismantling this one-size-fits-all approach to how we run recruitment processes, that we're learning more about the barriers that our candidates face because of their identity background and circumstances. We're appreciating that not everybody has the same job seeker career privilege that we may have, that we're facing up to the reality that actually who we are as a human being can even elevate us in our career journey, or it can create a blockade, or it can create a barrier, and we don't get the same opportunities as other people. And it's really about the practicality of making recruitment accessible to everybody and fair to everybody, and trying to do our best to encourage our clients to mirror the work that we're doing, and to ultimately, what we want to do, and this is an interesting one, is to enable our clients to build high performing teams. And so many times recruiters see the process as being quite transactional. It's just one person for one vacancy. But so often when we lift the bonnet, we are actually helping organizations build high performing teams, and really understanding how representation and equality feeds into profitability, into innovation, into high performance. And without it, we're limiting the ability of our clients in achieving their goals, their performance goals. So I guess, I'm making it sound really complicated now, aren't I? But it's typical.
No,
But
no,
it really is.
it's a beautifully kind of thorough explanation of something that is probably is actually quite complicated into a certain extent. And I just want to pick up on one of the kind of just picking up on that is, where are the drivers for this, right? Because you obviously work a lot with recruitment agencies who have obviously, they're recruiting on behalf of their clients. So
Mhm.
from the work you've done, is the driver coming from the clients wanting to be more diverse and equitable, or is it the agencies that are kind of trying to push this into their clients to be more
Mm,
of that?
mm. Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I think it's a blend of both. There are still a lot of recruitment businesses that will come to me and others like me, because they've started to lose work. They've started to lose pitches for retained work or build outs, or they failed to get on a PSL or managed service provider kind of list. And it's because they've not been able to evidence the work that they're doing around accessible, inclusive, and equitable recruitment. And so they're kind of right. We now know there's a commercial aspect to it, and I'm not there to judge. I'm just there to make sure that they don't take shortcuts and they are prepared to do the work. But there are also organisations where, interestingly, it's usually connected into an experience of a founder or a senior leader within that organisation, and they've taken a step back and looked at their business and thought, would I still be able to be successful or even get a job in my own organisation? And it's almost like, whether it's through personal circumstances, their circumstances have changed, or whether it's them, something that's happened to their kids or people that they care about in their inner circle, and they've actually started to think more and more about their responsibility, and what they can actually do to break down barriers, and ultimately evolve their talent pools and be more ethical, and at the same time build that commercial piece, so they become a recruitment partner of choice and they're future proof in their organizations. So there's various reasons. It's usually a blend between commercial and a real will, and a human will to want to do something different. And we're in the industry of making profit, right? So it's not always going to be that human element to it, but by the time they finish my program, they are absolutely focused on the human element, and I love that about the journey.
Yeah.
Right, it goes from commercial to human.
Well, I mean, it's interesting you bring up the kind of commercial aspect, because that's always going to play a part in this, right? So there must be kind of, a point where you can kind of use it as this kind of point of difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to help kind
Mm-hmm.
of build your brand, which obviously
Mm-hmm.
has then a knock-on effect commercially, right? Because it stands you out from everybody else. But can you talk us a little bit around that, how you can use it as a kind of a point of difference between you and your
Mm.
competitors?
Yeah, I mean, we talk constantly about how we build our talent pools out, right? And maybe the traditional ways of building talent pools have been exhausted, and we are looking at more innovative ways in terms of how we actually communicate to candidates. And I listened to something that you'd done the other day around, like, how we traditionally sell to people, and we tend to, I don't know if that was your exact words, sorry if I've misquoted you, but we tend to think that our clients and candidates need what we need.
Mhm.
And actually, by doing that, we are limiting our reach in terms of who really buys into what we're selling and who's responding to our marketing message. And I think often if we have an inclusive mindset, what we're thinking is we're not approaching people how we want to be approached. We're thinking about the various ways in which multiple different types of people like to be communicated with, and the things that trigger their buying of products and services. So I think when you've got an inclusive marketing mindset, you're automatically telling your clients, naturally, we will be able to attract more people to your business, and these are the reasons why, and this is how we do it. I also think, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on this, but I see a movement towards professional services coming from the recruitment industry. I think that clients are looking at more than just hiring services, recruitment services. I think that there's some really interesting work being done by recruitment businesses, not necessarily the giants, SMEs, that are looking at a whole suite of professional services and looking at how they can plug that into their suite of products for clients. And let's face it, there are lots and lots of end clients who are really struggling with attracting underrepresented talent. They haven't got access to expertise, they haven't done the work, they haven't done the training, they're leaning on the industry
Mhm.
to help us to somehow miraculously fill their organizations full of people that don't always exist. And I think that what a great position to be in as a recruitment business, to be able to say, well, actually, we can guide you through a program to make your recruitment services accessible, equitable, and inclusive. That will help you to become a better organization, develop your EVP, be more representative of the communities you serve, and improve not only our candidate experience, but your candidate experience as well. We position ourselves, don't we, consistently. We are experts in recruitment and hiring. And I honestly think that if diversity and inclusion is missing from that, you can't claim to be an expert, because there's so much focus now on bringing in different communities, addressing the reason why people are not showing up in shortlists, being able to demonstrate how you can build trust and build relationships with people who have been historically marginalized. And I think that will stand you in a really, really good position when a client is sat in front of you saying, what's different? Why do we need to work with you?
Yeah, I mean that all makes complete sense. Kind of picking up on the point around clients kind of struggling to find this talent. Do
Mm,
you think? And again, this is me being maybe slightly cynical, and it's probably a question I ask a lot of kind of experts like yourself. Is this a lot of clients just doing almost a box ticking exercise to a certain extent? Surely there is some of that kind of going on, that they feel they need to fill certain quotas or whatever it is, right? That
mm,
their gender pay gap is this, so
mm,
they're going to try and skew the figures, or they figure the way out to do this is like, well, we'll go down a hiring route, right, and try to be more
mm,
kind of diverse that way, but not actually worry about
mm,
much else once we're there.
mm.
Surely you must kind of come across like that as well, right? There must be a lot of that comes
Yeah.
through your.
I would love to say very, very rarely does that happen, but unfortunately it does. And a big responsibility of mine is to protect recruiters in the recruitment industry from breaking the law, and also to protect candidates, especially those who have been impacted by discrimination, prejudice, and have been marginalised because of who they are. And what I do is I equip recruiters with the ability to spot the performers,
Mhm.
to spot the clients who are looking to hire themselves out of their diversity problems, rather than actually look at what are the reasons why we are in this situation in the first place, and going through that journey of changing the culture, the behavior, the ethics, the policies, all of that equity piece that is the bedrock of all the work that's needed to be done. Let's put our energy into supporting those clients, because they're the ones with the deep-rooted EVPs that are going to help us to attract the talent in the first place. And they're also providing a culture where people are going to stay, and we're not going to be in a position where we've got rebates and people being psychologically damaged because they've been put into toxic organizations. So it's really, really key that recruiters understand that just because it's against the law to hire people because of their identity, especially when it's marginalized or underrepresented, it doesn't stop recruiters, internal recruiters and hiring managers asking.
Yeah.
And this is, this is happening all over the place with some of the biggest brands. If you look at the Equality Act, James, it actually says that it goes against the Equality Act to put a quota against identity. But yeah, I'm still hearing stories where clients are directly asking recruiters, we need 50% of this. We don't want to see any of those people on our shortlist. We need all of this or all of that. And it's almost, I always call it the identity shopping list. And what we're doing is we're excluding people and choosing one group over another, which we know is against the Equality Act and ultimately against the law. And we need to be empowered as an industry to go, no. We will not do that because it's unethical and it actually unpicks all the gains that we're making in equality when we start hiring people because of their gender or the colour of their skin or their religion or their sexual orientation. And ultimately, the damage that does to that individual, knowing that they're a token hire. And we don't want to perpetuate that as an industry. We shouldn't be. We should be pushing back against it.
Yeah. A great kind of philosophy, and something we need to kind of do a lot more of. So coming back to that kind of commercial aspect, because that's kind of really what we're kind of trying to kind of pin down a little bit today, is using ED&I for kind of business development. I know this is a bit of a shift from what we were just doing, but for business development, is this a situation of having a lot of your collateral with, again, your box ticking exercise, you've got someone who's of a certain age, someone who's from a certain ethnic background, someone who's kind of in a wheelchair or something like that in your kind of in your collateral, in your armory of business development kind of tools, right? Is that the way you kind of use this, or is and I hope there's a much more kind of subtle and intelligent way of going about all of this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not a fan of imagery. The stereotypical images there you've got, and this is the part of the website when we talk about ED&I, and you can just, without even looking, you can imagine what some of the imagery is on there, and yet those images do not represent not only your candidate base, but they don't represent your recruiter, your recruitment team either. So I always try and make sure that we are really, really transparent with our journey. If we are not doing any work, we shouldn't be talking about ED&I, and we shouldn't be using imagery that portrays potentially an image that we are doing something, because people have got diversity fatigue, right? If you are marginalized, if you face if you're under-recognized, if you're historically excluded, you are looking for a recruitment partner that is more than surface level and has images of you on their website. You want evidence, okay? So it's all about transparency, where you are at. And I find a lot of the time businesses won't talk to clients or candidates about where they're at until they're at this perceived end of their journey. And you're never going to get there. And it's about these small changes that you make to your recruitment methodology and your hiring culture that make the difference. And that's the stuff that should be communicated. So rather than using imagery and statements of intent, it's like, list the 10 things that you did in 2022. List the 10 things that you've done already this year. List the 10 things that you've got planned for next year, and make sure they're all really practical and people can see that you are doing something. Okay. When it comes to things like, from a commercial,
what would a good example of those kind of things might they be? Okay. Right, some kind of practical kind of things that if you are going to kind of create this kind of like, this things to shout about list, right? In from what you've done within ED&I, what could those be? What could we kind of aim for?
So it could be that we've made our website accessible, whether
Right.
that's through a rebuild, a redesign, or whether you've used an accessibility tool like ReciteMe. It could be that you've added statements and messaging throughout every level of candidate communication about adjustments and accommodations for people who are maybe neurodivergent or have disabilities or
Mhm.
are carers or parents, anything where anybody needs some kind of adjustment or accommodation to enable them to stay within the process. Whether or not you've done something as simple as trained your entire team on the Equality Act, or you've done a session around accessibility and reasonable adjustments. It might be that you are committed to showing the salary in every single advert, that you use a gender decoder for all your adverts, that you take out pronouns from job descriptions, that you ask your clients about the whole suite of benefits and make sure that you include them in all your job briefs. It could be that you're committed to going into detail about hybrid working on your job advertisements. It could be
I mean,
that yeah.
there's tons of
I
things,
mean,
right?
we
Yeah,
could,
yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
for
But
anyone who's
these are really
listening,
these are
yeah.
simple stuff, right? That you can do.
The only, let's say, so playing devil's advocate, could you not kind of fall into the trap of potentially virtue signaling though at that point where you're kind of shouting about here are the things that we've made a difference in them, and maybe maybe some people might think, well, you should just be doing that anyway, right? There's no need to kind of shout about it to a certain extent. I
Yeah.
suppose that's a marketing-y thing, and it's like where do you
Mm.
sit on that? If you see a business that has kind of made changes and then they're making a big song and dance about it, is that virtue signaling, or is that generally something that should be kind of celebrated because so few people are really making that kind of effort?
Mm. Again, I think that's a really, really good question, and it's all about the tone, isn't it? Right. So if you're acknowledging who that change is supporting, and you're doing it in a way where you want to influence and push for change and show allyship for that group, and also to influence other people in the recruitment industry and your clients, if you're wrapping it into an education piece as well, that also really,
Mhm.
really helps. I think again it's about, so candidates and clients are not just going to assume that you're doing this stuff,
Right.
because traditionally when we haven't been doing it for decades as a recruitment as an industry, and I think we have a degree of work. We're not at a place now where people will automatically assume that as an agency you're committed to inclusion. So I do think there's a degree of being really open and transparent about what you're doing, but let's not be chasing awards for making our website accessible.
Yeah.
Let's not be giving ourselves huge pats on the back for asking about accommodations and accessibility and adjustments, which is a legal requirement. But let's just find a really subtle way of, often, James, when I go onto a recruiter's website, there'll be so many resources for clients, and
Mhm.
the cell will be wrapped around the client, and I'll click on the bar at the top, and it'll say candidates, and all, it'll take me immediately to a job board. There'll be nothing else to tell me about the service that I can expect and the commitments and level of care. And I just think that's where we need to be populating this stuff, not in a aren't we great, we should win an award, but just so we do this.
Yeah. Yeah. One final question before I let you go, which is probably one of the more kind of important ones, is how do we find the confidence to talk about this? Because
Mm-hmm.
again, my feeling sometimes is it can be like a minefield, right? You don't want to put your foot, you don't want to step on it in the wrong place because
Mm.
for God forbid, again being very trendy, you don't want to be cancelled, right, or something like that. And I think that's
Mm.
what some businesses potentially feel there is the issue. So how do
Mm.
you kind of take that thing and say, right, we feel now we're in a position where we can talk around this. We're not perfect, no one is,
Mm-hmm.
but we
Mm-hmm.
want to kind of move that forward, and we want to stand for something real at this point.
Mm. I mean, you've started that off. I think this is about like really, really really communicating why this is important to you now, right? Why all of a sudden this is important, and being really open about your story. I think that unfortunately the calling out culture has stopped a lot of businesses like in their tracks. Um, unfortunately, it's stopped. The businesses that love the virtue signaling continue to do that because their marketing team love that stuff. But the businesses who are genuinely doing the work are like, we don't want to upset people, we don't want to offend people, so we're going to stop discussing it. And I just think, look, we need to take ourselves out of this. Our feelings have got to be taken out of the center of this, and we've got to think about our responsibility from an education perspective and an influence perspective. I think we need to try and make sure that we're using the voices of everybody across our business and give people within our business a chance to talk about things that really matter to them. Not forcing people to talk about their lived experience, but creating a culture where it's okay to be really open about your experience of your career and finding a job and your career path. That could be a way. I think that I always say to my clients, take an education approach to it. So you have a right to talk about inclusive, accessible, and equitable recruitment because you are a recruitment business and you are recruitment experts. Try and make sure you tie everything that you talk about into your profession, because you can't get called out for that. Okay, what you're not saying, you're not talking about something that you have no lived experience of. And if you do your research in your education and you're sharing things that other people have written about their experiences, and you're not talking on behalf of people, you're talking with people and as an ally, I don't think you can go wrong with that. And look, if I was worried, sometimes I will put things out on LinkedIn and I might use the wrong word. I might use the wrong phrase or terminology, right? Because not everything works for everybody. And someone might say, no, Joe, you need to rethink that. I don't get upset or offended about it because I'm not censoring myself. I'm like, thank you for that. Really good perspective. This is all part of learning. Every day's a school day.
Yeah.
And I just think sometimes we need to get out of our own way and think about, what are we trying to achieve here? We are trying to make sure that candidates can see that we are a safe space for them, that we are a fair and equitable recruitment business. That is going to be part of one of our pillars of communication. Let's commit to it. And if you're doing the work, you shouldn't find that too difficult to do if you take a recruitment and education kind of approach. Does that make sense?
That makes absolute sense. That's been perfect. Joe, thank you. It's been absolutely amazing kind of listening to you today. If anybody wants to reach out and kind of contact you and know a bit more about what you do, we'll include all your details in the show notes. So hopefully we'll kind of get a lot more kind of people kind of know about the kind of great work that you're doing. But for now, Joe, thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.